Hi, I'm Phil. This is one of a series of videos that I'm putting together on different types of orchids that are suited to temperate climates, such as our one here in New Zealand. Since Paphiopedilums is a large group, I've chosen to make two videos about it. The first one is about the different groups of orchids and the different requirements regarding light and temperature. This one is about the basic nature of Paphiopedilums, how they choose to grow as a group, and consequently their culture that suits them. Paphiopedilums are also known as slipper orchids. This is because the lip is formed into a pouch, a highly modified petal for purposes of pollination. To some people, the pouch resembles the traps found in some insectivorous plants. The pouch with slipper orchids doesn't consume insects. It does attract, trap, and then release insects for purposes of pollination. The other flower parts are the two lateral petals, which resemble wings. There are also three sepals, the dorsal one forming a hood over the pouch. The other two sepals are fused into a synsepal and are tucked in behind the main flower parts, so usually not visible from the front. A further feature is that paphs have no pseudobulbs and therefore no ability to store moisture. They therefore require regular moisture throughout the year. I'll come back to this when I discuss culture. The roots of paphs are different from other orchids too. They are a fawny brown colour and actively growing root tips are creamy. They also have distinctive root hairs. The roots are strictly terrestrial. They never grow into the air. If a root grows from the base down into the air, it will die rather than growing down into the media. I'll discuss this shortly. Paphs are sympodial orchids. That is, each vegetative growth flowers once when it matures and sends up a new side shoot, a short rhizome or creeping stem, which will produce the next flower or flower spikes. This is as opposed to, say, a vanda or phalaenopsis, which will keep extending and producing replete flower spikes. After the leafy fan flowers, it gradually dies. Paphs are different from most orchids in that they don't develop a natural abscission layer where the old leaf naturally falls off. Since the dead decaying leaves can be a source of rot, they should be trimmed off near the base. The geographical range of paphs is in a kind of triangle, with its extent marked by India, southern China, and the Solomon Islands. Although this is largely in the tropics, often the plants are found in hill country that can get quite cool. In fact, snow falls where Paphiopedilum ammoniacum is found, so the requirements vary from warm to cool. I cover this in my other paph video. Likewise, the need for light varies, from low to moderate light. There is a simple comparison graph at the last part of my other video showing this. Young plants prefer less light than adult ones, and higher light encourages flower production in mature plants. The plants are in theory terrestrial, that is, they grow on the ground, unlike epiphytic orchids. Note, I say on the ground rather than in the ground. In reality, usually they grow in leaf litter in forest or on moss and lichen on roots under light shade, rather than directly in the ground. The majority are lithophytic, that is, they grow on the detritus found on rocks. So in practice you can treat them more as epiphytic than terrestrial, but most paphs don't have the ability to stand the periodic drying periods that many true epiphytes have evolved to withstand. I have these paph insigne plants, which will tolerate cool conditions, growing in the bark mulch in a part of my garden, which is partly shaded by tree ferns. By coincidence, this particular fern is Dicksonia fibrosa, or Wekiponga. The ground-up fibre from the trunks is one of the favoured media for paphs and is exported from New Zealand. I'll come back to this. Paphs need a fairly fine media around their roots. However, they resent any failure of aeration. Newly potted plants often respond with a burst of vigour. It is possible to repot them every year. However, established plants look better and flower more prolifically, so it makes more sense to use a media that doesn't break down quickly. Most of the growth of new paphs is in the spring, and this is accepted as the main period for repotting. Some of the signs that a paph needs repotting are becoming top heavy, the leaves covering so much of the media that the plant becomes hard to water, plants becoming unthrifty owing to problems with the media, and roots making a congested root ball around the inside of the pot. If there are lots of dead roots, this suggests that the media is breaking down and repotting has become urgent. Sometimes it can be hard to tell which roots are healthy or unhealthy. Healthy roots are firm if you give them a gentle squeeze, while unhealthy or dead ones will collapse under any pressure. It can be useful to slip a plant out of its pot to see if the roots are becoming congested or being damaged by poor drainage and aeration. Roots coming from the stem are another sign that repotting is overdue. I mentioned earlier that unlike most other orchids, paph roots need to be continually moist, and if they emerge into the air, they will die rather than entering the media. So you can fill the pot with media until it covers the base of the lowest leaves to allow for the new roots. Another option is to repot on an annual basis. Paphs don't usually mind the repotting process. In fact, some cases they seem to revel in it. When repotting, water the plants a couple of days beforehand so the plant comes out of the pot easily, but the media is dry enough to fall away. I notice in videos that most growers squeeze the sides of the pots to loosen the roots, then pull the plant out from above. I prefer to pouch the plant between my fingers, upend it, then shake or tap the pot to encourage the plant to fall into my hand. I feel this is less stressful on the root system. Remove the old media carefully, being particularly careful not to damage the new root tips. Damaging them will extend the recovery time. In the case of a long-lasting media, such as New Zealand tree fern fibre, the old mix might not need to be discarded at all. Cut away the dead roots which are hollow and collapsed, and cut back any diseased or damaged ones to healthy tissue. Also trim off dead leaves. Sometimes you also need to remove the odd healthy leaf at the bottom of the stem to allow you to settle a plant at the right level in the media. To repot, hold the media in one hand so that the rhizomes, that's the creeping stems that shoots come from, are about 2 to 3 centimetres or 1 inch below the rim. Hold the plant between the thumb and forefinger and keep the plant steady with the pot with the other fingers. Fill the media with the other hand, tapping the pot vigorously to settle the media among the roots. You can use your fingers to firm the mix, but preferably not a potting stick. The rhizome should end up just below the surface of the media. Don't bother with crocks at the bottom of the pot. Contrary to popular belief, their addition doesn't improve drainage. Changing the material partway down the pot interrupts the natural capillary action that draws moisture to the bottom of the pot. This interruption is called a perched water table and creates a new area of saturated media further up the pot. So the roots end up sitting in soggy media. Pests such as slugs can also find a protected home amongst the crocks. Regarding potting mixes, the key aspect is that they hold enough moisture and have enough surface points to allow the root to efficiently gather moisture continuously in a well-aerated media environment. Some of these aspects can be a little hard to reconcile, so it's important to find materials that allow the best combo. I'll focus on 3 media options, although others are fine. The first is a bark mace medium. Many authorities globally recommend New Zealand pine bark once it has been commercially treated to provide optimum benefits. Because paphs grow on detritus gathered on rocks or on leaf litter and moss on the soil, the bark should be a fine one, number 2 or number 3 grade. This is a material which is readily available, is grown from sustainable forests, is long-lasting, allows air movement and drainage, and holds a reasonable amount of moisture and nutrients. This is the material I've been using for repotting, partly because it had already been used with the plants I purchased. I should add here that it is usually a mistake to have the various plants in a range of different media. Watering becomes much harder. To the bark I add fine pumice and charcoal, about 1 part of each 2 or 3 parts of bark. The pumice is immune to breakdown and is chemically neutral. That is, it won't go more acid over time, unlike some organic materials. Charcoal is believed to remove harmful salts from the media. I'm fortunate in having a convenient source of charcoal from a friend who makes it. With all these materials, I wash and sieve them thoroughly to ensure that all fine materials are removed. These would clog up the mix and prevent aeration and the movement of water. The next material that I can recommend is tree fern fibre from Dicksonia fibrosa or wikiponga, which comes from, again, New Zealand. This is also exported widely. Growers rave about this material. It is spongy and porous with excellent water holding properties with a large surface area that the roots can access. Furthermore, it only breaks down very slowly. There have been several articles in the American Orchid Society newsletter extolling the virtues of New Zealand tree fern fibre, particularly for paphs, which are quite demanding in their root requirements. Growers who use it swear by it. It is more expensive than other media, but the smallest paph plants mean that this isn't a big issue, plus the fact that it breaks down very slowly, indeed makes it more economical. The final material I'll discuss is sphagnum moss, the highest quality of which comes from, you guessed it, New Zealand. Why is it that so many of the best media all come from this one small country? Your guess is as good as mine. Sphagnum holds an enormous amount of moisture, yet allows air movement so long as it is not packed down tightly. The main disadvantage is that it breaks down relatively quickly. Also, nutrients can build up in the moss. Paphs are intolerant of excessive salts, so most growers using sphagnum would repot annually. I have never used it as a major medium for paphs, so I can't really comment much. However, it would certainly be something to consider, particularly for young seedlings in particular. Since seedlings grow exponentially fast compared with older plants, they're usually repotted more frequently anyway. Sometimes if roots emerge into the air, I pack a little sphagnum over the top of the existing media to give these roots a suitable environment to grow into. I have noticed that most growers who use sphagnum moss extensively are in hot climates, where the moss dries out and warms up quickly, so it doesn't get soggy and cold. I'll emphasise again, paphs are different from, say, cattleyas, which like to get wet and then dry out. Paph roots like to be moist all the time, and yet still have free movement of air. If you fail to provide these conditions, most of them will decline. Paphs need high humidity. I keep my greenhouses at about 70 to 80% relative humidity. I also grow a lot of my paphs inside glass-covered frames inside my tunnel house. Under these there is a thermostatically controlled heat pad, which I set at 20 to 25 degrees centigrade. So inside the frame it is very warm, minimum of 15 degrees, and humid, sort of like inside the human womb. The young paphs in particular seem to love this environment. For watering, remember that most paphs grow in high rainfall areas or places with high humidity. Paphs take in some of their moisture through stomata or pores in their leaves. At the same time, they need a high degree of air circulation, so it is usual to have fans in enclosed houses. Paphs need regular watering with no dry period. There is a high risk of failure of aeration with frequent watering if the water doesn't drain freely. That is why perfect drainage is a must. Watering should be done early in the day to allow the foliage to dry out before night time. Paphs tend to flop their foliage over the media they're potted in, so it pays to water the plant heavily from different angles to be sure that the media is properly wetted. I have a habit of shaking the spray wand over the plants and pointing it in different angles to ensure this. The process of watering also drives air through the media, which flushes out stale air and introduces new oxygen. On days that I don't water and just the surface is to dry out, I mist over the surface with the misting nozzle on my watering gun. I'll just touch briefly on some other cultural aspects. Paphs aren't particularly hungry plants. As with other orchids, you can apply a general soluble plant feed at half the strength recommended for most plants. They may benefit from supplementary calcium and magnesium feeds. Regarding pests, the usual suspects apply. However, mealybugs do appear to be the greatest problem. They often hide in leaf axils or in the flower. I do suggest that you watch my companion video on the different groups of orchids. The requirements for light and warmth of these groups differ quite a lot. So in that video, I show comparisons and make suggestions on how to treat your particular babies. Thanks for watching.